Once we're finished with our screen designs, we can use XD to add actions and transitions to your layers. This is called prototyping, which allows you to add functionality to your screen designs so that you can mock up the way a user might interact with your website or mobile app. The best thing about tools like XD is that designers can easily mock up interactions without requiring a coding or developer background. So this whole time we've been working in the design tab, and you have all of your editing options here on the left and the right hand side. When we switch to the prototype tab, you can see how all of those actually go away. That's why it's important to wait until the very end of your design process to start prototyping, because if you do need to go back and make any changes to the color, the text, any imagery like that, you will have to switch back to the design tab in order to make those changes. So that's just another big thing to remember in order to make those changes. So let's take a look at how to add interactions to our prototype. So what I'm going to do here is let's go down here and take a look at the menu that we have here. This is just a expanding side menu that we have in our app. And you can see that when I highlight over some of these things, you can see there's a little blue box that appears around them. If I double click into this, I go down to that settings layer. You can see that it highlights the whole thing and it gives me this little arrow with the circle around it. This now allows me to create a connection between this layer and another artboard. So I have two options. I can either click on this and choose to make my edits that way, or you can actually take that arrow and you can connect that to another artboard. So you can see when I take that over to the settings page, if I release that, now it's creating a connection between this settings layer and the settings artboard. So let's first take a look at the first section here. This is interaction. And this is going to set up whatever the trigger is. So whatever is going to be that action that the user is going to take in order to prompt this action. So I'm going to open this. You can see that there's tap as a trigger. You can also drag. Some of the other options are like keys and gamepad, or you can have a voice trigger. We're only going to focus on tap and drag for today. So I'm going to set this to tap. And that just means that when I tap on this, it'll take me over to my settings page. Now I have some options on how I want to create that transition. So whether I have a bunch of options here, I can either have it be a simple transition. I can have it auto animate, which I'm going to cover later in this video. I can have this be a hyperlink. So instead of having this connect to that page, I can have this be a hyperlink to an actual website. So if I was to click on this settings layer, it'll actually open up that website in my browser. I can also set an overlay. I can set a scroll to. So if I have certain content on the page that's lower down the page, I can be able to click on that layer and it will actually scroll down to that part of the page, which is really nice. I can also set previous artboard, and then some other audio and speech options here that might be useful depending on the project that you're using. So we're going to set this right now. We're going to talk about transitions. So I'm going to do a typical standard transition for this, and my destination settings was already set up. And you have some animation options. So depending on your prototype and whether you feel that it needs the animation or not, it's totally up to you and whatever feels right. You can have it set to have no animation at all. So when you click on settings, it'll just immediately take you to the settings page. You can have the screen dissolve in. You can also add some slide animations or some push animations. So let's just add a slide left to this. And real quick before I do that, I have my tap trigger set for my settings. I also want to be able to open this menu from the home screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on this menu item here. I'm going to double click to highlight on that. This is a little hamburger menu. And I want this to, when I click on this, I want to be able to open this menu. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to do the same thing. I'm going to take this pick whip. I'm going to drag it over to this menu. And I'm going to say, when I tap on this hamburger menu, I actually want the animation or the action to actually open an overlay. And you can see that the overlay is shown by this green box here. And I can click it. I can click this. I can move that around. But what I want to do here is I want the overlay to just overlay on the content here and just have it sit on the top. And I want that to actually slide in from the right. So I want that to slide right. And so now I have I've already done two interactions. I say I have it set so that when I tap on settings, it takes me to the settings page. And I also have it set that when I click on the hamburger icon in the top left corner, I want to open, when I tap on it, I want to open the overlay and have it slide in from the right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight on this artboard, and I'm going to press this play button. And I'm going to say, now when I click on this hamburger icon, you can see that now what it did is it actually opened that overlay, as you can see, and it slid in from the right using the animation settings that I had picked. And then since I had already linked the settings layer so that when I tap on the settings layer, it will open up that settings page. So if I tap on that, you can see I think I had that set to push left. So that was the animation. You can see the difference between those two things. Now let's choose another action. So I want to be able to say when I click on this back arrow, I want to be able to go to the previous artboard. So I'm going to go over to my settings page. Let me move this over here. And I'm going to say on this back arrow, I'm going to click on that arrow. I'm going to say tap. I want the action to take me to the previous artboard. And so now now I have this interaction so that when I click on this arrow, it'll reverse that animation and it'll take me back to that previous artboard. So you have a few options here in how you have things, how you can make this interactive. You can open an overlay, and you can see in order for the overlay to work, it has to actually be in another artboard. So that's another important thing to remember. If you're going to be working with overlays, that's one thing you have to remember. So if you're working with a dropdown or you have a pop-up, whether you're using a tooltip, it does have to sit inside of another artboard in order for that to kind of create, like, have a destination artboard to overlay. So those are some of the primary actions there, is transition and overlay. And one other thing I want to show you is how to add different flows and starting points. That's another really important thing, especially when you're sharing this prototype out with your professor, or maybe you're sharing it with another student. If you zoom into the artboard here and you select there's a little home icon that shows up on the top left corner. If I click on that, you'll see this little Flow 1 badge that pops up here. What this means is that any connection that I have going from this page, that's going to be the part of the prototype. It's going to set this page as the starting point for my prototype. And this is called a flow because in different pages of your app or of your experience, you might have different flows based off of what the user is doing. So we're going to call this the main flow. This is just the main experience. On the home screen, you have your main navigation, so you can go to the home, the activity. You can view your profile here as well. So we're going to call this the main flow. And as I have this set as the home, I have clicked on the home icon here. This is setting this as the starting point. So if I was to share this to somebody, share this link out with somebody, when they click on that link, this will be the page that it will start them off on. That's really important. You want to make sure that you don't set the wrong starting point or set the wrong artboard as the home screen, because you don't want to open a prototype, or you don't want your professor, or you don't want anyone to open the prototype and it be like the totally wrong screen. You can kind of create some confusion if you don't know where to actually start on the artboard. So this is the main flow, and actually if I wanted to, I can go over here and let's say that I want to have a separate flow for my inbox. So this is a little bit of a separate flow. I can actually go here and I can click on the home icon here, and I can call this my inbox flow. And so now if I zoom out, you can see I've got two main flows in my app here. I have my main flow, and you can see everything that's highlighted is connected. And another thing too, this might look a little overwhelming, and I totally understand that. But as you prototype and you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty simple. Sometimes once you get the hang of how the connections work and what these lines mean, it actually is pretty simple. So don't let all of these lines discourage you. And so now you can see I have my main flow and my inbox flow. And so if I go over to the Share tab that we talked about before, you can see that I have my two different flows here that I can actually generate links for. So I have my main link, and I have my inbox link. So for instance, if you were working on this in the actual design industry, and you were going to share this with a stakeholder, let's say you had one stakeholder that you wanted to view the main flow, and you had another stakeholder that wanted to view the inbox flow. That's a way that you could generate separate links based off of whoever you're sending this prototype to. And so here you can say the little blue tag or the home icon, that's set as the starting point for this prototype or for this inbox flow. And then the same thing for the main. You can see that over here. So I can generate a link and create a link for this. And when I share that link, whoever you're sharing this link with, they'll only get this part of the flow, which is really nice in being able to kind of customize different parts of the experience that you want to get feedback on. Okay, so we covered how to create a standard trigger using tap, the different types of transitions that you have. One other thing I think is important, if you decide to cover to use an animation here, you do have some easing options. The easing is really just the speed of how the animation carries through. So you have ease out, which just means that it'll start at normal speed, and then it will start to slow down near the end. It'll ease out of the animation. Ease in, which means it'll start in slow. It'll start the animation slow, and it'll actually speed up near the end. Ease in and out just means that it'll start slow, it'll speed up in the middle, and then it'll ease off at slow down at the end. And then you also have some custom options like snap, wind up, and bounce that are they're different options for ways to animate different speeds. So I believe bounce like speeds up, slows down, speed up, slows down, things like that. So you can play around with these if you want to see how the transition works. And then you have your duration. So if you wanted to speed up, if you wanted it to be a really fast animation, you can make this 0.1 seconds, or you can make this multiple sections. You met multiple seconds. You can make this 5 seconds. Oh. So it looks like you have to put a space in there, but if you put 5 space S, that's how you can make that 5 seconds. So I'm going to set that back to 0.3 seconds. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Apparently, you have to be very specific. So 0.3 space seconds in order to do that. Cool. So now let's talk about this new type of trigger. So we're going to look at the drag trigger first. And if you can see, when I click on this, all of my transition options actually go back to auto animate. So there's 2 parts to this. In order for drag to work, it needs to be an auto animate action. So I'm going to open this other artboard, or this other file that I'm working on. Let me close this for a second just so that we can focus here. So in order to add a drag trigger, you need to make sure to get an understanding of how auto animate works. I know we talked about the importance of naming your layers, and this is really crucial in order for auto animate to work the way you want it to. So you can see here in my artboard, I have this frame, I have this group here, and inside of that group, I have card 1, card 2, card 3, and card 4. And inside of every single one of those groups, or every single one of those cards, everything is named exactly the same. This is really important in order for auto animate to work the way you want it to, because the way XD works is it basically says, when I make the transition, it's going to take the 2 artboards and it's going to say everything that is named the same. I'm going to fill in the information, and we're going to make a guess of how to animate from artboard 1 to artboard 2. And it will notice any differences between the 2, and it will say, it will try to make that animation for you based off of whatever is named the same. And so what I usually do, and what makes the most sense, is inside of this I have this carousel. You can see I have my carousel here. And I'm actually going to space this out so that it's easy to, let me move this up here. So I have my carousel, I have everything named here. If I duplicate this artboard and I just move this over here to the side, I now have the same artboard, everything is a different artboard, everything is named the same inside of that. And what I can do is I want to take this and I'm going to just drag that over a little bit. I'm going to have this go to the second page. Okay. And what I'm doing is I'm setting this artboard, the second artboard, as the whatever I want the animation to happen. I want this to be the second step in this animation. And so this is going to be we're going to transition from this first card to the second card. And when I want to do that is I also want to have this second button of the pagination be at 100%. And so you can see, if I set this back to, you can either drag this down to 50, or another thing you can do is if you press 5 on your keyboard, it'll also bring down the opacity down to 50%. So now I have two artboards. I have my carousel, I have my group, and then all of my cards inside of that. And then on the second artboard here, let's just call this call this 1. So now what it's doing is I have everything is named exactly the same. I've got my group too. Close this pagination. And all of my cards are named the exact same. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go to the prototype tab, and I'm going to say, when I select this second card here, I'm going to pull this over here, and I'm going to say, when I drag on this, I want to auto animate to this second page. And what that's going to do is it's going to fill in the information from the first artboard to the second artboard, and it's going to make its best guess on how to animate this. So if I preview this, you can see when I click on this, I'm going to click and drag, and it's going to animate for more. It's going to animate for me, and it's going to shift everything over to the left. And when I did that, you can see how it also added it also transitioned from this first dot to the second dot here. So let's say I want to do the same thing, but I want to go backwards. So maybe I want to go back to this previous screen. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the little line, the little pick whip. I'm going to drag that over to the first page, and it's going to default to the drag because it's going to remember my settings. So we're going to say on drag, I want to auto animate back to the first page. And so now I can go back to the previous page by clicking and dragging. And now I can go back and forth between these two pages by using the drag trigger and the animate trigger. And so if I wanted to, I could go in here and I could duplicate this layer again. I can have this be number 3. And I'm going to move this over again. And we'll say when I click and drag on this, we'll go down to number 2. And let's say we'll do the 4th step in this. And I'll shift this over again. And I'm still using the same artboard or the same contents that I did in that first artboard. Everything is still named the same. And I'm going to say that when I click on this, we'll go back to the previous page. And so we'll drag, or when I drag on this, I'll go back to the previous page. It'll say auto animate. And so now that I created this new artboard, I can also add this transition so that when I drag on that, it'll take me to number 4. So now I've gone through and I've added interaction to every single one of these cards. And so it looks like I might have missed this on number 2. So if I go to number 2, I can say when I drag on the third card, I want to drag, you can take me to the third artboard and so on. And in here, I could also do the same thing I did for the pagination. So I can go down here and I can edit the color to say, I want this to be 50%, and I want this to, I think it's 0. I want to adjust the opacity so that the third dot, we're on the third page now, and then let's look at the 4th page. We'll make this 100%, and then we'll make this 50. And so now you can see when I go between my pages, XD is taking the information and it's going to auto animate between everything that has the exact same layer name, and it's just going to make a simple auto animate transition. Now, this is a very simple example, mainly to show you how important it is to name your layers. But what happens if I want to really if I want to show a really advanced transition? Maybe I want the card to grow a bit. Maybe I want it to shrink. I want to play with the opacity of the whole card. So what I did here is I followed the same approach that I did before. I have everything is named the same. And all of these things could actually be 50%. And what I'm doing is I'm basically saying, as I go through these different pages, and what I did down here is you can actually see the breakdown of every step for each of these artboards. So I have the first card is larger and it has its full opacity. When I transition to the second page, or the second card, that's also going to grow, and it's going to be full opacity. But as I transition to that second card, you can see that the first card, it reverses the transition, and it goes back to being the same size as these other cards, and it comes back in opacity. And I repeated that process for every single one of these, and you can see that all of these are named the same. They're all named carousel. All of the cards are named the same. And I just carried it over and I added the transitions with my prototype options for each one of these. So when I click and drag on the second card here, it'll take me over to my second page. And I did the same thing for all of these. So inside of this artboard, I have this. When I click and drag on this card, it'll take me back to this page. When I click and drag on this card, it'll take me to this page, and so on. And so what it's doing is it's saying, okay, I'm going to auto animate on drag for every single one of these transitions, and it's going to look for that information of what is named the same. So if I preview this now, if I click and drag, you can see that it's going to notice the difference between the two pages. And when I click and drag, you can see how the first card is going to shrink and go backwards in opacity. And then the second card is going to come into view, and it's going to grow, and it's going to be full opacity. And I repeated that process for every single one of these cards. You can see as I go through, I can click and drag to go through every single one. And all this is I just made sure everything was named the same. Play with the opacity, play with the scaling a bit. And you can get some pretty cool effects by doing this. And I follow the same process with the pagination down here. So I'm just increasing the opacity on some of these for each one of those pages. So auto animate can be a little overwhelming. It can be a little hard to figure out. But as you practice it, you realize how to get the effect that you're going for by maybe having something sit off the page the way we have here. As long as everything is named the same, XD will be able to fill in that information, and it will animate in for you. Hope this helps.